Episode 33, Forrest Tuff, founder and CEO of One Vision Productions. Forrest Tuff. Gosh, I turned that. I didn't mean to turn that almost Forrest Gump. That was just me misspeaking.
Hey, listen,
I'm Mark Graban. This is My Favorite Mistake. In this podcast, you'll hear business leaders and other really interesting people talking about their favorite mistakes. Because we all make mistakes, but what matters is learning from our mistakes instead of repeating them over and over again. So this is the place for honest reflection and conversation, personal growth and professional success. Visit our website at myfavoritemistakepodcast.com. It's the last week to enter to win a free My Favorite Mistake coffee mug. Go to markgraban.com/mistake33. And now on with the show. Well, hi, welcome to My Favorite Mistake. I'm Mark Graban. We're joined today by Forrest Tuff. He is, among other things, the founder and CEO of One Vision Productions. It's an award-winning multimedia production company. He is a professional speaker / business coach / author. He also describes himself as a filmpreneur. Did I say that right, Forrest?
you got it right, Mark.
That is a combination. He's got creative skills with business savvy. He has over 180 movie credits. He's got an IMDb page, which is pretty cool. These credits include indie films, documentaries, a major motion picture with 20th Century Fox. He's the host of a show called the Tuff Show, and he was also a Division I basketball player. So, Forrest, wow! If this podcast was called "Is There Anything You Can't Do?" you would.
I like that one, Mark.
you would be right at home. But welcome and thank you for joining us. This is, of course, My Favorite Mistake. How are you?
Thank you. I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Well, I'm really excited about the conversation. I think there's a lot we can talk about, but let's dive right in as we usually do. Forrest, what comes to mind when you think about your favorite mistake?
If I had to think about what my favorite mistake was, Mark, honestly, I'd have to say believing in myself when I chose to embark on this entrepreneurial journey. Mm-hmm. You know, coming out of school, having played sports and having that dream deferred, now having to work, it was a little daunting when I decided, you know what, I think I want to do this for myself. But I think that's the favorite thing that I did. I made the mistake to believe in myself and venture out. And looking back on it, that's got to be the favorite mistake I ever made.
So, I mean, at some point, did that feel like a mistake? Because that seems like a really positive thing, believing in yourself. But what happened there?
Well, you know, honestly, entrepreneurs, most of them won't admit there's safety in a paycheck. You know, when I was working at a job, you know, in sales or in management, I knew that if I did a certain thing or if I produced certain numbers, even if I didn't hit that mark, I still had a check coming to take care of bills. And so that was a very safe place to be, you know, and embarking on this entrepreneurial journey, it's not as safe. I mean, there are moments when you're scratching your head going, wow, I just don't know where it's coming from. And when you're really starting out, you have to be the person that generates everything until the business grows. So yeah, it can be daunting, but you know, honestly, it did seem like a mistake. You wonder if you made the right decision, you know, but in the end, it pays off.
So what helped get you through, you know, those early days or those times when it's a struggle? I relate to that when, you know, it comes to, you know, when I left a regular paycheck behind 10 years ago, we'll call it. There's struggles to get started. I mean, during the pandemic, I have times where I'm scratching my head, trying to figure out, okay, what comes next? How did you get through some of that? What did you draw upon?
Well, for me, I think my parents really were a stable place for me because they actually did the same thing in their journey. My father became a pastor. They've been in that line of work for 40 years now, but at the time he was in the education industry. My mother was in sales. And so they embarked on that journey of starting their own church from scratch. And we started in the house. And I remember as a kid, the only members we had were my brothers and I and my sisters. It was just a sibling. Yeah. So I think having that background, they were able to give me sound advice, even though it was a different industry, just on how to weather that storm and to make it. So for me, my parents just having that same entrepreneurial background was key for me.
Yeah. Now, were there others, like, did you have advisors or friends or family who were saying, "Hey, Forrest, you're making a mistake leaving a safe, predictable paycheck"?
Yeah. Yeah. I had tons of friends that were telling me, "Hey, what are you doing?
Yeah.
You're leaving a good job to go out and start this venture." The truth of it is, I'm thankful for all the people, the people that were for me and the people that said, "Forrest, what are you doing?" Because you need that fuel sometimes to keep going. A lot of people in the world now call it haters, but I think those people help motivate you just as the ones that support you. So yes, I did. I chose to accept mentors, people that had been in business, and I would sit down with them and ask them, tell me what was the worst thing that ever happened and what are some bad things. So I had a couple of people that I did listen to and use their experience. And eventually, after I had been in business for a while, I actually went to an organization that focused on mentoring small business owners and entrepreneurs.
Yeah, so tell us about that, because I saw that in your background. I've heard of it. I'm familiar with this is SCORE, right?
Yes. So SCORE is an organization. It's a resource partner through the SBA, the Small Business Administration. They've been around for about 60 years. And what the organization does is help mentor pro bono individuals that are want to start a business. So for me, it was kind of a double-edged sword. I went to help after I've been in business about a decade. I wanted to help, but I had this resource of, executives and retired executives and entrepreneurs that I could pull from on a daily basis to give me information that would help me grow. So it worked out great where I received a lot of information and I was able to help people. And honestly, even in helping entrepreneurs, I would learn something.
Sure.
So that was a great experience. And it has been for me. I've been a mentor now for 6 years. So I think it's been part of why I've been able to sustain my business.
Yeah. Well, that's very cool. And I mean, there are different dimensions of your professional life and background that we can delve into here. But thinking about the SCORE program and being a coach to other entrepreneurs, are there common mistakes, if you will, that you see entrepreneurs making, situations that you end up coaching them through? What would you say is one of the most common that you try to help people with?
I would say one of the most common things is wanting to have the perception of being an entrepreneur versus the reality. Mm-hmm. Oftentimes you want to take money or you get a loan and you want to just go out and hire people. I think you really have to have a solid plan of action or business plan to know what's going to be the best course for you. I think for some entrepreneurs, I tell them, hey, listen, you're the CEO, but you're also the janitor. So it's okay. Forget the image and focus on making sure that your company stays in the black and you get a return every year. Yeah. So I would say the biggest thing that a lot of entrepreneurs suffer with is mishandling money and the image that they'd like to put out versus the reality of being an entrepreneur.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and one of the themes, of the podcast series here is the idea of learning from mistakes. That we're all human as individuals, as leaders, as businesses. We make mistakes. If anything, lean into it. And it's not that we should be trying to make mistakes, but when they happen, let's learn from them. So, I'm curious from your perspective, what comes to mind then? If you're coaching organizations, what do you try to convey to others about the idea to learn from mistakes as opposed to hiding and covering them up?
In my personal experience, one of the things I had to learn was basically how to reinvest back into the business. There are times, I say entrepreneurship is like the seasons of the year. There's a winter, spring, summer, fall. And there are those times when the money's just flowing. Everything's going great. Well, in that time, that's when you really have to store up and you have to reinvest that back into the company. And of course, you all have to take vacations, but, set a budget for those type of things. Don't splurge because there's going to come that winter and things are going to, dry up and you're going to be scratching your head like, where's the money? So, it's best to prepare for those times about, when things are really going good to save up. And that was a lesson that I had to learn. I learned it fast, but I always share that one because that really helps in that sustainability aspect of being an entrepreneur, business owner.
Yeah. And it seems like the learning fast is the key. Is what I hear you saying.
That's right.
Being able to not just keep going, but, I'm curious of the different things you're involved in. was the production company the first entrepreneurial venture, or
Yes.
tell me more about getting started with that.
So back in 2004, when I embarked on starting my media production company, it came from a place, early childhood. My mother always had a camcorder and she recorded things. And even at my father's church, we would record service. And so throughout my high school and college years, I would have my camcorder recording everything, parties, hanging out with friends, just regular everyday life. And one day, as an adult, now that I'm working, someone would say, "Hey, do you record birthday parties? I'll pay you." And that struck the chord. And that's where everything kind of originated from. That one small birthday party. It evolved. And, over 15 years, 16 years later, the company grew from doing weddings and, we do photography, music videos, and we started to branch out to working with corporations and working with the government. So that's the lifeblood of all my endeavors, if you would say that. Yeah.
This is going back to dating myself, or we'll both do it. Was this the camcorder up on the shoulder?
Oh yeah, when I was a kid, we had this shoulder cam. That's what started first. So to give you a time frame, I came out of high school in '91. That's when I graduated.
Okay, me too.
I give you a time frame of what it was, and then we moved into the little mini tapes, and so now everything we had to go through. I think our generation is formidable because we've had to undergo so many changes and still manage to stay relevant from, hey, we had the internet when it dialed up, you had to wait an hour just to get online. So yeah, that's the generation I'm from. The big camcorder. We started the big one, big shoulder mount.
With the full size VHS tape.
Full size VHS tape, exactly.
Yeah. So that really makes me think about, for being Generation X, being resilient. We've gone from renting VHS tapes to renting DVDs to now I don't think I have a single DVD in the place.
I'm streaming everything. Awesome. Exactly.
So I'm curious to learn more. I've never, one thing I love about this podcast series is getting to talk to people with such a wide range of backgrounds. So I've never had the chance to talk to anybody who's been involved in film production. Is each film its own entrepreneurial venture? Like how do you try to find out, hopefully sooner than later, if a production is quote unquote a mistake?
So in my case, before I just jumped out, I actually worked on other people's productions in a capacity or in a role. Because I had been in production, I knew how to film, I knew how to edit, I had equipment. There's so many things. I'm a licensed drone pilot. So if they needed a drone pilot on set, I had a skill that I could use to be on a set and learn. So for me, that was my teacher. I didn't have time to, go to school because I had kids that were growing up and going to college. So I said, I need to do a lot of networking. So for that, I used a lot of volunteer time. I volunteered so much to say, hey, yeah, listen, you need an editor? I'll edit this project for you so I could see the process. Oh. So for me, I cut my learning curve by having a skill set that allowed me to be on sets and learn about the industry before I started producing my own films. Mm-hmm. So I cut down a lot of the mistakes I would have made. And that just came from having the experience of being a business owner and knowing the mistakes that could be made with any new venture.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's smart. And you're learning on other people's dime. They're paying you to learn.
And sometimes not paying me to learn, but that was part of the process because I was breaking into a totally new industry. Mm-hmm. And so initially I needed to know what they knew, and people have a tendency to give you more when they know that you're working towards a goal, but you're doing it coming in at that volunteer space. So for me, it was a very strategic volunteering. That's what I call it. I had a strategy to my volunteering. It just didn't have it had an end game. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. Well, that's smart. So I think one other, I want to ask you to think back, Forrest, to your experiences as a college basketball player, playing Division I at a very high level of basketball. I was reading about your background. You were a guard, you were a shooter. Is that right?
Yes.
So, I mean, it's different than now when, half the shots being put up in every game are from behind the arc. But I read about you hitting a lot of threes in a game. So I was curious, when and I'm not a basketball player. Like I played in the driveway as a kid, and that was all. But when you read about shooters, I'm curious if you have this mentality. You could go out and miss your first 10 shots of the game, and it seems like a true shooter isn't afraid to take that 11th shot. What
Right.
was your mindset when you think about shooting, missing shots, mistakes on the court, bouncing back from that? What was your mentality?
It's interesting because this style of play that's we see now, that's how I played then. I had the rough aspect from playing at the parks, but I became a long range sniper, as I called it. And I
Oh,
always had this saying that at any moment things could change, because when you're a 3-point shooter, the game can change instantly. There's a certain momentum with a three. It's almost like somebody comes down and slam dunks the ball. It's just like the energy that it creates. So for me, my motto was never give up. Just like in business, you never give up, right? So that means I'm not going to stop shooting. And my friends sometimes will go, really tough. That's your philosophy, never stop shooting. But it was the truth. I always felt like at any moment things could change. So as a shooter, yeah, I'm sorry. I never was scared to pull the trigger.
it seemed like that is a common mindset among the
Yeah,
top shooters, right?
yeah, it is.
Um, but I'm curious, like what the thought process was. You missed 10 in a row,
Mhm.
and do you start thinking about like, is it my shooting form, or are they just not going in? Like, I'm curious what that thought process might have been.
So I'll be frank with you. I shot about 50% from 3-point range. I was ranked top three in the nation. So I didn't have games where I went on those type of streaks. I really was strategic about shooting. I had a formula for getting my best shots. Like I knew that if I ran up and down the court at least 4 or 5 times before I started, pulling the trigger, I'd have a higher percentage of hitting shots. Now, if in the instance that I get cold, which it does happen, I'll
Mhm.
start to drive. I would, change it up a little bit, go to the basket. I wouldn't just shoot until I'm cold. I would, find other ways to get involved. I might, hunker down and play, intense defense, anything to get a rhythm, because shooting is rhythmic. So for me, I had to make sure I found a rhythm. If I'm doing good on defense, or if I'm driving to the basket, or if I'm making a great pass and my team is getting into it, once I find that rhythm, it normally translated into shots falling. So
Mhm.
that's how I normally did it. I wouldn't just shoot myself out or shoot my team out. I would try to do other things to help get myself in that rhythm.
Yeah. So that makes me wonder. I mean, is there a more generalizable lesson from that? If you seem to be out of rhythm with business or whatever projects you're doing, I wonder if it's just kind of mixing it up or doing something to try to mix up that rhythm. If that helps, I'm trying to think what a parallel would be.
No, that makes absolute sense, because I'm glad you put it that way. That was great. That was clever, because in a sense, that's what I do oftentimes. If I find myself in a rut, or if I'm working, or, even when working with people, or have my hands on it, if something's not flowing, I'll take a break from it and go somewhere else.
Yeah,
I may have to take a break and go right, because that'll help me, get my spacing, or if I'm writing and I'm having writer's block, I might go and create something in the editing room. So I do take the time to diversify in a sense. It's almost like, it's a team sport. And in my line of profession and the things that I do have to diversify what I'm doing. Like, I'm also a public speaker. And if I find myself like, wow, I'm just not motivated by what I'm hearing, I may need to go do something else, to get the creative juices flowing. So that's a great analogy to say that, just switching it up, even in business, to make sure that you can be productive when you're doing a certain thing.
yeah. I'm a big fan of getting up and going for the head clearing walk. Just
Yeah,
I spend a lot of time at the computer, especially this day and age.
that's right.
Not traveling for work, and yeah, sometimes you just need to, or even go take the laptop out of the docking station and go in the other room. Like, to me, mixing it up means sometimes just a change of scenery
Absolutely right. It does.
in
It does.
a fresh perspective. So, one other question, I'm just curious. I like trying to connect dots. When you talk about being a coach to entrepreneurs through the SCORE program and
Mhm.
other things, do you draw upon thinking of different coaches that you played for, and do different coaches handle? mistakes differently. Player, sloppy pass, something out of bounds, taking a poor shot early in the shot clock. What are some of your recollections about different coaches and how they handled, if you will, players making mistakes?
Yeah. When I played in the 90s, I mean, you had different styles of coaching. The Zen master was just on the rise, but back then we had the coaches that would get in your face and yell and but you had to have a thicker skin with the styling of coaching back then. So, I had coaches that could get in your face, but you knew they cared about you. They yell at you, and at that next moment they're calm. It's like, all right, he got it. Then you had the coaches that would talk to you, make sure you understood, and then ask you, what did you hear me say? So those different styles, helped me to see that there's not just one way to mentor or work with somebody. Each person has a different way that motivates them. And so as a mentor or coach, you have to find that out with each individual. You have to talk and find out what motivates them and how do they get things done. Some people you can challenge them, get in their face, and they're like, I'm out, I got it. Some people you have to talk them through it to where they understand it. So it's not a cookie cutter process. It definitely is a case by case process. So I would say, to assimilate that, the coaching style has helped to foster a way to mentor different individuals.
Yeah. Cool. It's very smart. I think of influences I've had, this idea of understanding, if you're a manager with different people on your team, mm-hmm. they're not all the same. You got to understand what makes each individual tick.
That's right.
So I want to talk a little bit before we wrap up about a lot of your focus with speaking. And one thing, looking at the topics and things you talked about that stood out to me is the idea of servant leadership. Mm-hmm. How do you describe or define servant leadership?
For me, servant leadership is, one, leading by example. What you do resonates with people, and also having an understanding that what you're doing has a greater purpose than just your personal gain. So for me, even though I'm a for-profit business, I try to make sure that not only myself, but the people that I work with and my staff, we work towards a higher purpose. And there's a way to balance that. So in our organization, we started a pay it forward grant. So for about 5 years now, we have a community grant that we give to local nonprofit organizations. And this is something that we do to kind of give us another purpose other than just making money. Mm-hmm. And I think it's nothing wrong with that if that's your choice. But for me, and being that servant leader, I like to make sure that I give back to the community and find innovative ways to help out, however we can when it's conducive. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So one other question about speaking, like what's your favorite topic or theme that you wish event planners or organizations would let you talk about more? Like what?
I wish they talked about entrepreneurship more. Yeah. There's a lot of huge conferences for corporations and, talking to C-suite and, I think that's great, but there are so many people that are on this entrepreneurial journey and they need to know what's next. What do I do? How do I innovate? How do I get out of my box? Because many of us, we went to school, some of us on so many levels, when they got a master's, a PhD, we've gotten a lot of certifications, professional certifications. So we have a methodical way of approaching certain things. We know that if we start with A to Z, there's a process, mm-hmm. and that process usually yields a result. And so when you have that trained way of thinking in that environment, it breeds success 9 times out of 10. But when you step out of that environment where A to Z in a straight line no longer works, you may have to go to Q and then come back to B. It confuses people. And that's where I think would be a great opportunity for, some keynote conferences to have speakers like myself come and speak to those people who now have to reacclimate or change the way they view how to have success in their industry.
Yeah. Or even if it, within these companies, there's a big need for that entrepreneurial mindset. Some people refer to intrapreneurship. How does a big company become more innovative, so that people can build that muscle and practice those entrepreneurial skills, not just for their own benefit if they were to leave the company or go into a next phase of their career. But yeah, I agree with you. Even internally,
even internally, it could help them
is helpful.
To be innovative and think outside of the box to create revenue for the company, even if you want to stay with that company, just to help, refreshing that mind muscle.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then, so you talk about speaking, and then you talk about writing. I saw you have a book that you're working on, Live to Make an Impact. So that seems to touch back on that theme of having a purpose beyond just making money. Tell us more about the book project.
So this project is really a culmination of my journey, just the things that I've learned and my philosophy on life, my take on life. And I think that's the most important thing. And I think what resonates with most people is your personal journey. I can't speak to someone else's, and I can't say that this is the best, but I think for people that are interested in that life or that may be prone to view the world in that way, I think this could be a guide, and I have points and takeaways that have, been useful in my life that I would love to share for those who are interested in that type of journey.
So I know you're still working on it. 2021 sometime, you think it might be?
I want to say 2021. I'm trying
to put you on the spot. Just curious.
Let's say 2021. Let's bump the timetable to make sure that happens. But it's definitely a project I am working on currently.
Great. So again, our guest has been Forrest Tuff. Forrest, what's the best website people want to learn more about your work, your speaking, and everything else?
Sure. You could go to forresttuff.com, and that's 2 R's, 2 T's, 2 F's. forresttuff.com. Forrest
Tuff. Gosh, I turned that. I didn't mean to turn that almost Forrest Gump. That was just me misspeaking.
Hey, listen, I'm used. As a matter of fact, I did a keynote recently where I designed this poster where I look like Forrest Gump because I knew they would readily identify with it. So yeah, I've dealt with that. I've turned that into a term of endearment now. So yeah, but actually forresttuff.com, and you can find anything, about any endeavors that I have going on.
Yeah, and you do have a lot going on, like I said up front. So, Forrest, it's really been a pleasure having you on the podcast and getting to learn a little bit about you. Thank you so much for being here and sharing your insights.
Mark, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Sure thing. Thanks for listening. I hope this podcast inspires you to pause and think about your own favorite mistake and how learning from mistakes shapes you personally and professionally. If you're a leader, what can you do to create a culture where it's safe for colleagues to talk openly about mistakes in the spirit of learning? Please subscribe, rate, and review the podcast. Our website is myfavoritemistakepodcast.com. See you next time.